Richmond entrance channel, which has a boat ramp for, just the neighborhood. You have like boat ramps all along that whole East Bay. So I believe he took the boat in at the East in Richmond, the what they call the Richmond entrance channel. I believe he he drove out, motored out about a mile, 2 miles into the channel that is dredged to 40 feet to accommodate the shipping lanes there. Okay, so that whole area is dredged really deeply. It's not like 10 feet deep, 5 feet deep. It's actually 40 feet deep there. I believe he rolled her out of the boat and the tarp blew away. So I believe that's the tarp that was blown down and that the water dogs alerted to, a couple days later. And so then I think he motored back, brought the boat home, and the next day he woke up and was worried, because you've never done it before. He didn't know she would stay down. Maybe he worried about retrieving that tarp. So he went back. He goes to the office, mulls around a little bit, worries about it, gets in the truck, drives back, goes out on the boat for an hour or so, putts around. We don't even know he went to Brooks Island. He said he did. Nothing he says he did, we can believe. I believe he puttered around, looked for the tarp, maybe drove out, for about a mile or so, didn't see anything, came back, maybe even went up to that vista that he liked to visit where the racetrack is with his binoculars and looked for anything, didn't see anything, went home. And that's what he did. And then he expected her to stay down there indefinitely until she was no longer, recognizable.
And then that's when he called the cops.
Right. He never called the cops. He called Sharon Rocha.
Right.
And her husband, Ron Gransky, called the cops.
And what, that was New Year's, Christmas Eve that they called the cops?
Yes, Christmas Eve, 8 or 9 at night.
Okay,
and,
but
I might have been a little earlier.
Yeah, but in your theory, though, he doesn't go after the cops get involved. He doesn't then go back there again, right?
Only to see what they're up to.
Yeah, to see later on.
He goes back to see what they're doing, where they're diving. And whenever he would go out there and he saw that they were by Brooks Island, which he misled them to believing where he was. He threw him a red herring. Said, "Yeah, I was at Brooks Island." So they're looking over there. They're looking in the wrong places. And he's like, "Okay, they're not going to find her there." And he drives away.
And you're saying that the cops went up there right away within the next couple of days of being called about this missing girl? They went up there with dogs?
They went on the boat. Yeah, there was a boat search within a couple of days of that, yes.
Really? So right away they suspected him, yeah.
Yeah, there were water dogs right away.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. All right. What a tragic case. Okay, well, he's been in prison. How long has he been in prison for? Since 2002? It's like 15 years, right?
Yeah, he's been in prison. He was in jail the entire trial because
Right.
he had no hearing to, to let him out on bail because he was a flight risk.
Yeah. Okay, so he's gotten 15 years so far, and then this, and when's the next hearing on this habeas?
It doesn't say. It doesn't say anything about him getting any hearings yet. So this right now is all the court, the lawyers have submitted their documents, and then the prosecution responded to it. It's quite long. You don't have to read it, but it does kind of go over all the points that they make, and just reiterates that the trial was fair, and that the evidence was correct, and that Garrigus wasn't incompetent. And so, I don't know. I haven't heard from him. He followed, or he defended, in one case, he defended a guy named Cameron Brown who was convicted of murdering his 4-year-old daughter by pushing her off a cliff. He defended this guy for the first trial, and then he dropped out of the case. And there was a mistrial, then there was a second mistrial, and then a couple years ago he was convicted. Now there's a guy who could have just pled to involuntary manslaughter and been walking free today.
Yeah. Now, what were the complaints about in this habeas? What are the complaints about Garrigus that they said that he was doing improper?
Well, that he made promises in his opening statements that he didn't fulfill.
Okay.
That he made promises that he would be presenting witnesses who saw Laci walking the dog on the 24th. And there were numerous people who claimed to have seen Laci walking the dog, and it turned out they were either other people who looked like Laci, or they were other days that weren't the 24th. And so all of those witnesses were eventually, I guess, Garrigus decided they just weren't good enough or weren't credible enough to present them. So he never presented any of them. And he kind of alleged to them by, hearsay through testimony from different police officers, especially Bracchini. He would say, well, didn't you hear from a person who saw that Laci walked the dog, et cetera? And so he kind of brought it out that way, but he never put on the stand any witnesses who saw Laci walking the dog. And you got to also remember that Scott claimed that Laci was wearing a white blouse or a white, shirt and black pants when he left. And that day was cold. It was 50-something. She's not going out there without a jacket on. And ultimately, she was found with tan pants on. And that was the spaghetti pants that were all shredded. She was found with shredded tan pants on, not black pants. And so basically, Scott was saying, how would she have her clothes changed if she was nabbed off the street wearing black and white?
Well, but what was she wearing when she went to get the haircut at the sister's house?
The day before?
Yeah.
She was wearing black and white.
Black and white, okay, but then she was wearing tan. Okay, so we know it wasn't that night. Then it was, she could have went home and changed, I guess. Yeah. Oh, boy, it brings back a lot of...
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. She, when you're pregnant, you only have a few things to wear.
That's true,
it's
too.
not like you have a huge wardrobe.
Yeah.
So she may have gone home and changed because she might have been kind of dressed up when they went out to dinner. And you come home and you're like, oh, I don't want to wear these nice clothes because she was going to bake. She was baking. She had a whole bunch of recipes on her refrigerator. She was setting the table for her Christmas Eve dinner. All that stuff was done. She had all this stuff cooked. She had the stuff in the refrigerator. She had the ingredients for creme brulee. She was, organizing her house for her Christmas Eve party. So she could have gone home, put on a pair of ugly, sweatpant type things, like tan capris, which is what she was found in, and a white anything, because her blouse was destroyed. They didn't find anything for over her torso. So, she could have changed her clothes to clean the house.
Right. And who was coming over for the Christmas dinner?
Her parents. Well, her mother and stepfather, her sister, possibly her brother. I mean, she was preparing for the Rocha side of the family, the Gransky side of the family. So that was her family coming the next night.
And that was for Christmas dinner, Christmas Day dinner.
I believe Christmas Day dinner, yes.
And this genius chooses that night before to kill her,
Yeah.
with a plan, because he was planning this. He bought a boat.
It's
just beyond your imagination.
Well, what's really beyond the imagination, and what you brought up before the last break, was when you said, what motivates people to defend Scott Peterson?
Yeah, right.
What do you think?
Well, do you still have him defending him? Are you still in contact with any of those pro-Scotts?
Unfortunately, they are attacking me on Twitter, and I just block them because I don't have any time for it. I'm not going to relitigate this case. And, I believe that Matt Dalton, who was originally on the defense team as an investigator and was later either quit or fired from the defense team. He wrote his own book about how the satanic cult could have done it, how the dog walkers were never called, how the guy who went to jail and claimed that Laci interrupted the robbery that took place across the street. Well, the burglary that took place across the street happened on the 26th. And even if she had interrupted them on the 24th, the burglary took place at 10:30, which was when Karen Service had already brought the dog back to the house. So the window of opportunity is zero for her to have interrupted the burglary. And the burglars, I think, were just, who knows? Maybe they just wanted to get some attention. I mean, there were these little neo-Nazis out in Fresno who claimed that Scott Peterson requested some information about how to kidnap his wife and how to steal her car and make it look like a carjacking. And those guys surfaced. So there were all kinds of crazy people who surfaced during this trial, like very high profile trials get a lot of crazy people trying to get attention.
Yeah, right. Matt Dalton was a private investigator that worked for the defense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and he's behind this A&E show.
Oh, really? Okay, I'll get him on the show.
And the only reason I know that is because his wife's friend, she says, I am best friends with Matt Dalton's wife, and we have good information about him, about Scott is innocent. And, she started tweeting at me in my, in my Twitter account. And I said, hey, I have no dog in this fight. If you get a new trial, great. I'll write another book. I don't know what you want me to say. But, it's preposterous. Okay.
And you're saying, though, that the day after Christmas, the 26th, there was a burglary across the street. While the police were investigating this crime, there's a burglary. Yeah,
it was in the morning, and it was an open, it was an empty house, and it was an inside job probably, and they had a couple of knuckleheads who went in there, and they took a safe. So there's probably a story behind them. I guess it's the Medinas. It's spelled like Medina. There's some story behind the Medina burglary too that we never really understand what was going on with that. But I believe it was disgruntled employees or someone they knew.
Okay. And these neo-Nazis, how would Scott know neo-Nazis? How would he know Nazis?
Supposedly, Scott, when he was visiting Fresno, either before or during his relationship with Amber Frey was very short-lived, so it was probably prior to that. But he would go to various strip clubs and other, underworld areas that, attracted some less than savory people. And he had a conversation with these two kids who were, I guess, had neo-Nazi type paraphernalia or tattoos or something. And he asked them, how do you hire a kidnapper or a carjacker? I want to get rid of my wife.
Really? Now, has anybody talked to these neo-Nazis? Has this been confirmed? This is a real story?
Well, they had a lawyer up.
Okay.
So back when they were, this came out, it was all like all the talk shows were talking about it. Their name was like Dirty and Skeeter or some crazy.
Yeah, I remember
like
that. Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, Skeeter and Dirty. Yeah.
Yeah, you remember now? It rings a bell.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So you know what I'm talking about.
I do. Yeah. That's interesting because that's a meth connection too. Because all those guys are cooking meth.
Yeah. So that's what also brought that whole idea up that maybe Scott was a supplier of some sort of, some ingredient that he had access to with Trade Corp.
Yeah, it's an androgenous hydroxide. I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly. And it's very unusual because the fertilizer he was selling was more expensive, and it wasn't as good as all the fertilizer all these other farms had that they were happy with. And he was trying to peddle this stuff that was more expensive and wasn't as good. There was no market for this stuff. You know what I'm saying? And you're saying Trade Corp went out of business. The parent company went out of business, or those two local?
No, I don't think they went out of business. I just think they closed. They left Modesto. They closed that Modesto office and left that right away within minutes of Scott's being accused. I mean, they didn't even wait for him to be arrested. They just blew out of there. And the funny thing was that the prosecution or the investigators requested from Trade Corp, hey, did Scott Peterson embezzle from your company? Did he fudge his expense accounts? Did he rip you guys off? And they said, oh, no, he was a model employee, and then they vanished. So I'm pretty sure Scott Peterson was up to something fishy, but we have no real good evidence of it. We just have speculation at this point.
Right. Well, because no one's investigated. Now, what about one of the officers or the president of this Trade Corp came down and visited California? It was from France or Spain or something.
Spain, right, yeah, exactly.
Spain. Traveled here, and then he was meeting with Scott and Laci Peterson in a bar, and they were laughing and joking after Laci went missing.
Well, there must have been something going on, Ed.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was. And, your guess is as good as mine, but that may be an unsolved mystery.
Yeah, right. Okay. I don't know. I think it's pretty solvable. I don't know. If someone bothers to look at it, I think it's all right there in front of you. But anyway.
Well, maybe down the road something will happen with Trade Corp, and
book number 3.
You and I will be alerted of it, and we'll see what's going on.
It'll be
something will happen. Something else will happen.
Stone Cold Guilty Part 3. Now, so now you were saying back with the website there, your blog, Confessions of a, what was it again?
Observations of a Misfit.
Observations of a Misfit. Boy, it brings back so many memories. Now, what other cases were you working on at the time?
Well, at the time, at the time that we were working on, we were blogging about, I was blogging
Yeah.
about Peterson. There was another Peterson, Michael Peterson
Sure.
from Durham,